I am the law of living in truth. Truth is a constant movement of self-renovation. It flows calmly, imposes nothing, and allows you to connect to the universal powers. Every opening towards truth releases more spiritual energy, leading you into being who you truly are. You have to invest in truth, even if it seems humiliating to accept your own limitations, to descend from your defensive superiority and be like everyone else. The first step toward love is to face what lies in you. That is how you contribute to building trust in the integrity of people and the world. Nurturing the highest level of self-revelation is key to the continuous process of purification and transformation in your path. You activate your divine nature in every honest step you take. I am the law of living in truth.
Which I was attracted to the picture. I think it goes that way. So the law of time encompasses the development of all entities. Past, present, and future move in a sequence of occurrences that are specific and necessary for the individual and collective purification and transformation process. Time, movement, and space are interrelated on the earth plane. There is solar time and its external objectivity. It's fixed, static, nature, segmented into hours, years, seasons, etc. And there is subjective time in its relative time dimension. In this sense, real time is what you feel, what you experience, and what you are. Being in the now, even when your outer experience is negative, creates a sense of peace. In the now, you reconcile with the truth and reality in yourself. When you separate and demand something different from reality, you are not able to hold your desires either because you do not understand them or because you attempt to cheat reality. In order for love to blossom as a free movement, these domains of consciousness have to be fully explored in an unrestricted time flow. You are one in the now. The now is you. I am the law of time.
Thank you. And thank you very much for reading those cards. Those are beautiful cards. Oh, Stephen's here. Hey, Stephen.
Hi, Stephen.
Greetings from are you in New York? All right.
Right down the street.
Greetings, Stephen. We can't hear you. Here we've got some folks here. We got Barbara, Allison, Joel, of course, Teresa.
Hey, Stephen.
All right, Tracy, and myself. All right. This is a amazing lecture. All of them are so great. It's shockingly great. The language of the unconscious. Now that kind of recalls Sigmund Freud, right? I mean, the path is very allied to psychiatry, isn't it? I mean, this whole thing is about making the unconscious conscious. Isn't that what, Freud was all about? He traced the dreams he called the royal road to the unconscious. The guy talks a lot about the symbolism of our language and how to interpret the symbols, things coming from the unconscious. And I think there's actually an exercise here that sounds a lot like free association, where you kind of meditate and let things bubble to the surface. So I wanted to read a poem. E. E. Cummings. I thank you, God, for this amazing day, for the leaping greenly spirits of trees, and a blue true dream of sky, and for everything which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes. I who have died am alive again today, and this is the sun's birthday. This is the birthday of life and of love and wings, and of the gay, great happening illimitably earth. How should tasting, touching, hearing, seeing, breathing, any, lifted from the no of all nothing, human merely being doubt unimaginable you. Now the ears of my ears awake, and now the eyes of my eyes are opened. E. E. Cummings. I think that's kind of about the yes current and the no current. I feel that way about it. Now, you might recall that I had the good fortune to receive from John Paracas's daughter, Magdalene Paracas, all the materials that Eva had. And this included letters that she had written to John. And many of these letters, there she is, right on time. We were talking about the theme of the lecture, which is the language of the unconscious, which is making the conscious. And of course, in a nutshell, the guide says that anything that stands in the way of your fulfillment is an aspect of your no current. You're saying no to it. And the job that we have is to try to ferret out, make what's unconscious conscious, so we can understand how the no current is manifesting. All right. So, as I just mentioned, I have these letters that Eva Paracas wrote to John. And I bring these up because many of them recap dreams, and she interprets the dreams. So it sort of coincides, or it meshes with the theme of the lecture, which is making the unconscious conscious and making whatever you see in a dream conscious, making that, using it to understand what's going on. So, all right, gang. July 7th. Dream last night. I was asleep in my bedroom and heard two men from my house coming in. It was all right. I'd given permission because something was supposed to be repaired. Yet I felt a bit afraid. I then moved into the living room and slept there for some reason. I don't know why. Again, I heard someone come in. Again, it was someone from the landlord. It was not criminals. The man walked right through the living room quite fast, as if busy to do something in the bedroom, and then walked out fast. He was about to leave, but I didn't really want him to leave. Although I was afraid of him, didn't quite trust him. I also didn't want him to leave. I knew if I made myself noticed, he would stay, but would walk out if he didn't know I was there. When he noticed me, as I wanted, he came over and stopped over my bed. It was somehow very menacing, and I was in sheer panic. I wanted to scream, but was so afraid that I could hardly bring out a sound, only muffled. I think I must have actually muffled some screams and woke up from them. Interpretation. Means exactly what it says. I bring my hidden fears of man's double nature, two men, out into the open, into my conscious life, living room. This has reduced the fear sufficiently that it is no longer criminals. The men are from the landlord, i.e., the owner of the place, i.e., my higher, wiser self. Something should be repaired equals my distorted neurotic fears and my deep unconscious. Then one man comes equals my own split or double attitude about men begins to unify. I now know that my fears are irrational because I am more aware of the fears. So I'm also more aware of my longing to have the man, the love, the closeness. I know he will stay with me if I really want it, but my inner terror to be betrayed still exists. Quote, the man will do something in the bedroom and quickly walk out, expressed exactly my fear. These are the deep, deep levels of my most hidden unconscious. The more I can pinpoint these fears consciously, the weaker they become. The more unified everything becomes, and the more open. It is significant that last night's dream almost coincides with John's present wave of negativity he experiences when the end of this phase is approaching. I must have picked it up and reacted to it with a feeling of betrayal, terror, and distrust. This doesn't mean, of course, that his problem causes mine. It could never do that. His problem can certainly activate mine, just as mine can his. The fact is that both our healthy sides affect each other almost constantly, but also our neurotic sides activate each other's neurotic sides, as it must and will continue to do as long as they exist. This is true of all mankind, of all living creatures, even as the moth activates the killing instinct in Psyche, that's her cat. It is entirely unrealistic to believe one causes the other. This made me realize that my fear of the yes, as discussed in the last installment, is on a still deeper level really a final fear of no. How often has the guide explained that the two sides of duality are basically one, and that the same, and that duality must be transcended so as to find the unitive principle. That alone is the end of all strife and pain. Thus, on a most superficial level, my fear is to encounter frustration, disappointment, rejection, etc. Upon reaching deeper levels of my being, a first inexplicable fear of yes was found, which became acceptable only when I understood its general universal nature, applicable to the very state of human development. I understood in the last revelations that this universal human phase of evolution manifested as my personal neurosis as a result of my identifications with my mother and Marta, either being loved, Marta, or loving, Mama. On a still deeper level now, I find that the fear of the yes exists as a result of not quite trusting the yes. Fear, disappointment, rejection, hurt, cruelty may come again any minute, so that if I accept the yes and expand into it, the negativity will hit me any minute when least expected. I could experience this today during the telephone conversations with John, when I felt him cut off from me, negative, cool, even irritable, perhaps a note of resentment, irrational but nevertheless there, that on my account he loses his home, etc. I sensed this even before he was more outspoken about it, cut me off from my feelings. After he was honest, the hurt and fear were conscious. Therefore, I was more alive and feeling again. This fear of mine will be overcome. I pray and meditate for guidance. I will take the risk. I will obtain the inner security. I know I can deal with the ups and downs, and therefore, quote, the man won't walk out after doing something in the bedroom quick, unquote. If I'll take the chance and face what seems so terrifying, he will stay with me. If I don't close my eyes in my terror and produce a wishful thinking, unreal yes, a real yes will emerge more and more. If John's no's won't be an absolute abyss of terror that makes me contract in fear, the cruelties won't come or won't be as deadly as I now fear them. My increasing awareness and facing the reality without exaggeration will remove the terror. I won't dramatize those instants and will choose to consider the real ramification of any of his negative states. This will also help him to overcome his problem. He will fear less and less to be himself, will dispense more and more with the impressions he has to give to his environment, proving his idealized self-image. The more he knows his real value, the less submissive he will be to authority figures of his environment, and the less he has to prove to them to live up to their values. The more he overcomes his secrecy and shame and keeps things no longer hidden, the more he will know his values and can no longer permit others to make him feel guilty. Conversely, the more that he can give up pretense and the pride of the idealized self-image, the greater his strength and self-respect will become. Also, the more he can give up the childish greed to have everything and not let go of some aspects of a past that was destructive in the main, the more will this maturity give him a deep sense of his integrity. He will no longer be in a double bind and in bondage with anxiety, weakness, fears, and false sentimentalities. This will make his love more secure, and he will help me through his development, and I will help him through mine. I think he begins to sense that part of the reason for not being able to make a decision until now, for being passive and unassertive, was that he neither wanted to lose the positive aspects of his past life, living with the children, his house, the approval of relations and friends, old habits, etc., nor of the life he has with me. This is a neurotic cheating that diminishes one's sense of self-respect and integrity. This, of course, never works. In the end, one loses all, in addition to feeling good about oneself. If approval by others gains such importance, It is only because one does something to lose self-approval. He is growing more and more into this new strength and integrity.
He was
He
married
was-
before
Right,
and has children with.
right.
But she wasn't married before.
She was, but she didn't have children.
Okay. She never had any children.
No. So just imagine having Eva for a girlfriend.
I'm sure Eva was married before.
Excuse me?
Are you sure Eva was married before?
Sure. Yeah, where do you think Brock comes from? I mean, Eva Wasserman was her maiden name. She married Herman Brock.
Oh,
And Brock-
I thought Brock was her father.
no, Wasserman was her father. So this letter is one of quite a few letters that she sent to John, and she sent this to him, I think, as a kind of way of reconciliation when they would have a fight. And she would interpret, fascinating interpretation of the dream, didn't you think?
Yeah, very.
I mean, whoa. I mean, it's like I've never, my dad could do that. My dad could take a dream and every single thing in the dream, he knew what it was, just like she does.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like
Just naked.
something else. So I just felt that would be a good introduction to this lecture.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, of course. Go ahead.
How did you get done better?
Okay. When Paracas died of a heart attack in 2000, everything went to his John Paracas.
What Paracas?
Piracas.
Up here.
Everything went to his daughter, Magdalene. She had all his papers, and also he had all of many of Eva's papers and documents, because after Eva died in 1979, John, of course, since they were married, inherited everything Eva had. She didn't have any other close relatives. She had a brother who died, Albert. She had a sister, Barbara. I'm not sure, back in Europe. So what happened was that he had all of her possessions, and then when he died, then I negotiated with Magdalene, his daughter, to bring these over to the Pathwork as a kind of Eva's legacy.
They lived on the Upper East Side.
They lived on the Upper East Side. Yeah, I think was it the 60s, Sid?
What street?
What's her?
74th Street.
74th.
I think 340 East 74th.
Yeah, yeah.
Ava and John lived on 74th Street.
All right, so let's talk about this lecture here. In this lecture, as I said, the guide builds a bridge between psychology and spirituality. The guide says the same thing that Freud says in the beginning, which the unconscious is where much of the power and passion of the personality is, both constructive and destructive. As I mentioned, Freud said that dreams are the royal road to the understanding the unconscious. So how do we hear the language of the unconscious if we don't remember our dreams? Well, in this lecture on page 6, the guide gives an exercise that we can use to kind of bring out what's unconscious. And we'll get into that later. So on page 1, the guide says, the most powerful aspect in your life is the unconscious. Everything that comes to us in life is determined by, quote, your unconscious thinking and feeling. He says the unconscious is much stronger than the conscious mind because the absurdity of conscious misconceptions and unrealistic outlooks is more easily detectable and can therefore be corrected. Now that makes sense. I mean, things in a dream don't make a lot of sense. Things in the unconscious does not really relate very well to waking reality. In other words, he's saying that a lot of the things that if they were in our waking life, we would reject them immediately as being absurd. But in the unconscious, we don't do that because there's a different logic that the unconscious uses or that operates in the unconscious. So I was kind of thinking about Pandora's box when he says, It is often forgotten that the unconscious not only harbors petrified wrong conclusions, destructive behavior patterns resulting from images, and negative emotions due to unresolved problems, but also utter wisdom, divine truth, and the most constructive elements in the universe, constantly binding them, building them with unending creativity and love. So like everything is there. And I guess Pandora released all the things into the world, and we're trying to release everything that's in the unconscious so we can bring it into what the guide calls a couple of pages later, the daylight of consciousness. He says on page 4, whatever it is, try to take these vague, hazy emotional impressions and question them in the daylight of consciousness. I like that. Yeah. If you ever read Finnegan's Wake, it's basically, that's what that is. It's the unconscious of mankind. Literary note. So page 2.
Right.
Yes, I'm sorry, Teresa, go ahead.
Thanks, what strikes me about the first sentence you were talking about when he talks about petrified wrong conclusions,
Yeah.
like sometimes I feel like this work is so hard. And the reason it's so hard is because these things that are unconscious are like rock, they're solid.
Yeah.
And to try to break them up and release the energy that's in them, like even though we can't see them with our senses, they are solid. And sometimes I can, feel that in my own being, you find these like hard places that don't move. So, that's why the work is so hard.
So hard.
Yeah, plus
So.
it's not only the energy petrified in the rock, but also we have it happened to me, is we have also the other thing is our unhealthy ego, that when you try to get into this kind of energy, the unhealthy ego is putting a lot of resistance.
Well, with
You
the
say,
ego-
oh, this looks
right.
so difficult. That's your ego saying, oh, honey, it don't bother that much.
But it is also
It is,
very soft.
but it is. But if
So-
I think that it wouldn't be because of our unhealthy ego, the child that we want to, etc. It would be easier to understand that it's a rock. But guess what? We can dissolve this rock. But the ego is
Well, only with the help of the higher self.
only
With the help of the higher self. All right, so let's. Great deal of hard. It is hard. It ain't easy, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. On page 2, the guide kind of says some mind-blowing stuff here about the yes current and the no current. The guide kind of creates a bridge between the human organism and the universe itself. He says, your personality is a repetition in smaller form of the whole universe. He says, both the individual and the universe exist because of a certain distribution of various cosmic energies. The way these energies interact and are arranged determines the harmonious or disharmonious existence of the created being, human, universe, plant, or leaf. In the ideal creation, these energies and forces work together, complementing one another, rather than hindering one another. So he's setting the stage for this discussion of the contrary forces, the yes current versus the no current. Says, when a stellar system disintegrates, do they do that? I guess they do.
Yeah.
I'm not an astrophysicist, do they? It is because contrary forces are at work, the opposite of truthfulness, realism, awareness, and consciousness. The two opposing forces create such tension through the pressure of two opposing energy currents that finally an explosion occurs and the entity annihilates itself. This is again applicable to a stellar system, a planet, or the decay of a leaf on a tree. To put it simply, the universe, up to a certain degree of development or awareness, consists of two primary currents, a yes current and a no current. The yes current includes every constructive energy because it accords with truthful insight, which cannot help but breed love and unity. The no current is destructiveness because it inadvertently deviates from truthfulness, thereby breeding hate and disunity. This general explanation applies to your individual daily life as well as to great concepts in the history of creation. So, another key concept, right? The no current is destructiveness because it inadvertently deviates from truthfulness. So we don't understand how the part that deviates is unconscious, right? That's it. So that's our task, to bring the unconscious conscious, because then we understand where the deviation comes from, and then we can transform the no current into the yes current. He says,
I had a little trouble.
I just want to read one more sentence here. It is easy and absolutely feasible to detect the yes and no currents within yourself in your daily lives if you learn to understand and interpret the language of your personal unconscious.
Barbara?
Barbara,
So,
speak.
I mean, maybe this is just, maybe you can just clarify. The idea of cycles and seems to be opposed to this, you know, when it talks about like a leaf being decayed or destroyed, that isn't that part of, you know, the cycle of life, you know, that, and like a natural thing, we're born, we grow, we die. I mean, leaves. And so I don't understand how it's sort of saying like, oh no, it's, you know, like the no current of the leaf is stronger than the yes current of the leaf. So can you,
Yeah,
join
I mean,
those together?
I thought of the same thing
oh yeah,
when I read that.
uh-huh.
I did think of that.
And
And well, I mean, what I would say, you know, is that these cycles are part of the spiral movement
uh-huh.
of the pathwork. In other words, which is they happen over and over and over again. And every time they happen, if there's consciousness at work, it can understand things on a deeper or a higher level. I think that's part of the explanation. Although I do agree that, I mean, the guide is obviously, look, I mean, death and decay is part of the world of duality, which is what we're in. And we can't, I mean, the guide is obviously not saying that if your yes current is strong enough, you can reverse. Well, maybe it is. You can reverse duality, and you no longer have to live in the world of duality. Well, what do you think, Tim?
I thought also that it's a dualistic flow, like life and death, reincarnation, that whole cycle. Because we're still living in the dualism, we haven't transcended it yet, we're still in the process of transcending.
So in other words, the yes and no current is part of duality.
Yeah,
And once you're out of duality,
you're in.
Exactly.
you're in a different kind of current,
It's
maybe.
part of this world creation, this
Uh-huh.
material creation that
I
we are
see.
living in,
Okay.
and death and life.
Okay.
It is, you know, we know that that's. And but you know, we know of even even the guy says in other lectures that when you transcend, you actually connect with your higher self, even death ceases to exist. So basically, there's a point when you can actually transcend, you know, and that. But as long as we
I think we're getting to
Yeah.
to an explanation of
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
What do you think, Kevin?
That's how it is.
I agree with what's been said so far. Yeah, very much so.
See now, just to throw a little,
Okay.
Wait, Joe.
so you say the leaf, but maybe the leaf's already programmed that part of life, part of the continuation of the tree is that when it gets cold, it becomes dormant and the leaf dies, but the tree continues to live. So how does that, you follow what I'm saying? So I don't see the death of the leaf, although if it's an analogy, that's a different story. But the death of the leaf is not necessarily a no current. It's part of the
That's a good point.
acceptance of the nature of life, of nature.
That's a very good
Right? It's
point.
the same way
Mhm.
the Pathwork says about our death, that when we death, and I put that in quotes, when we die, the more that we accept that, and
Yeah.
maybe even embrace it,
You can transcend.
then we transcend it.
Yeah,
It's not a painful, difficult process because there is no death.
There's
We're
not
leaving our
manifest
body.
either. You're not gonna be, your consciousness is not gonna be attached to a physical temporary form. Right now, our consciousness is attached to a form that's physical. And and by everything that arises in this plane of existence passes away, even rocks, nothing is permanent. Everything is, so one thing like that Eckhart Tolle talks about, which is to think of life more as a verb, to think of things more as a verb as opposed to an object,
Yeah.
and as opposed to a noun.
Yeah.
And I like that because so the whole cycle of the circle of life is like the tree, that leaves fall, but they create the nutrients for the roots of the tree to allow the tree to then again bloom and create more life, more leaves. So we saw a very interesting thing on YouTube last night. Joel and Chad and I, there was a woman who's very much like Jane Goodall, but she works with big, large cats, and she just said one thing that captured my attention. She said, when you watch a cat get she used a Giselle, and the Giselle is, gets, but it's done. She said the most interesting thing is there's never fear. There's never fear in the eyes of the Giselle.
Gazelle.
Because Gazelle, thank you. Because it knows that it is aware that this is part of the cycle and that it has no fear because it knows that its consciousness, which has been attached to the gazelle, will simply reattach to another physical form until it also reaches a stage of evolution where that's not necessary, where you don't attach to physical temporary forms. Your consciousness is in the unified state of consciousness. And a lot of people talk about like the subtle spheres being sort of like, have you heard of that? The subtle spheres, so this is what they call gross sphere, not meaning gross, but meaning solid. Which and it really isn't, because everybody also knows that everything is vibrating light molecules, right? Not actually even solid. And
Or denser matter, denser sphere.
everything is it's different configurations of the same molecules, the same vibrating frequency, light in different frequencies.
Yeah. So that's kind of a parallel discussion along the lines of, how evolution works and how we transcend into higher forms. But the yes and no currents exist in many ways in our lives. And we have to, it's all about interpreting the no current. That's what this lecture is really about. Where the no current manifests and how to recognize it. He says, it's on page 2. The yes current is often the more noticeable of the two because it is mostly conscious. Whenever you find yourself disturbed because of a persistent unfulfillment, you can be sure that both currents must be strongly at work, thus inhibiting each other. I mean, obviously, we all know that we're contradictory beings, right? We have impulses that are often at cross purposes. John Paracas, it's funny, we had a bioenergetic session and John said, Alan, you're like two opposing forces, and one is going at 50 miles an hour and the other's going at 60 miles an hour. You're only going at 10 miles an hour, but you're putting forward 110 miles per hour worth of effort because of you're doing this and you're not getting very fast because it's the two cars butting against each other. So I think that's a good analogy, right, for the yes and no current. Yeah, it's scary.
And how exhausted sometimes we.
Very exhausting. All right, so now then on page 3 he talks about a very simple way of looking at this. He says, in those areas of your life where things go easily, where you appeal to be lucky, where most of the time you're fulfilled without any problematic and confusing crises, you can be sure there is very little no current. And the yes current predominates without a contradictory hidden undercurrent. To put it differently, not only is the surface attitude, but the attitude of your entire being undivided and in accord with reality. You are not split in motivation and in desire. But in areas where you are repeatedly unlucky, the no current must be at work in one form or another. Of course, the reasons may vary with each individual, but the underlying causes have to be clearly defined in order to inactivate them. So, if you keep on trying to race with a pair of lead boots, you have to think, hey, wait a second, maybe I should take off the lead boots before trying to run. And then it's the key concept. Any goal you consciously desire and nevertheless do not attain is proof that an undetected no current is at work. And of course, what the guide says is that, like the Rolling Stones song, you may not get what you want, but you get what you need, which is that if you have a goal and you want to accomplish that goal and you can't do it, there's a spiritual way in which you can achieve that. It may not be exactly in the way that you think you need to have it, but it will come to you in a different form. So, and the way to cope with unfulfillment, he says, is to discover the unconscious misconceptions, false guilts, and the destructive attitudes that prohibit it. So that's pretty clear. That's the basic message of the lecture. Yeah. Page 5. I'm sorry, I'm still on page 4.
Page 4?
Yeah. He says, like I mentioned this earlier, this lovely phrase, try to take these vague, hazy emotional impressions and question them in the daylight of consciousness. So he's talking about here in the first paragraph on page 4, where you have a goal and you want to go toward it, but you're afraid of it. There's something that's preventing you from reaching the goal. You will discover how you slightly cringe at the thought of the fulfillment and whenever it approaches. If it's a fantasy, everything's going to be fine. But in real life, you may detect a vague feeling of familiar uneasiness, which you used to push aside when you thought about the fulfillment. Is it a feeling of fear or false guilt that you do not deserve it? Whatever it is, try to take these vague, hazy emotional impressions and question them in the light of consciousness. So then in this paragraph, he talks about how to look at your wishes and your hopes in this light of how are you sabotaging yourself? How are you not, one example, how are you not being flexible, which may be necessary for you to get the fulfillment? There needs to be flexibility. If you feel you have to have it in a certain particular way and you're not getting it, you're rigid. You're not allowing the universe to fulfill the yes current. When you become aware of the constantly working no current, this is the Marian thing. Even before fully understanding its presence, you will find relief from hopelessness, and the way out will be in sight. You will understand why your life has not changed in spite of extensive recognitions of images and childhood lessons. You will now detect the destructive feelings in the service of the no current: fear, guilt, anger, frustration, hostility, etc. So the observation itself begins to do the healing. When you observe, you begin the process of healing because you accept it. No matter how many findings you make, nothing will really change in your life until you observe the no current in action daily, again and again, until you interpret its messages and decipher its codes. So the guide says on page 5 that on the pathwork, we try to understand the images that control our lives, right?
Yeah.
We all know that. Whatever the childhood misconceptions are that we still think are operating, we make the recognitions, but he says, if frustration remains in your life in spite of having found relevant images, the no current still exists. And after having determined that the no current must exist, It's now a question of experiencing it, not just once, but wherever it is at work. Now he mentions what you said, Teresa. It's important to stir up the petrified part of the unconscious. And I think that then the next paragraph, this stirring occurs partly through the unavoidable life circumstances and partly through deliberate processes in the pathwork. So when a crisis manifests, it stirs things up. And then you can see how your unconscious, how these things have erupted into the world, into your life. They bring a crisis. So
That's good.
crises are good. And then to recap, he says, detached observation of something obscure and strange is the most healing procedure on the path of liberation. When your yes current observes the no current without frantic self-accusations, it becomes possible to translate the latter into concise human language. The concise formulation of previously vague feelings is invaluable and needs to be learned in the early stages of this path. So, he says this time and time again, don't be afraid of stating, bringing these vague feelings to the surface and examining. And isn't that the process of, free association or dream interpretation? You're bringing things to the consciousness. Like in a dream, a lot of strange things occur. And they may seem vague or trivial. You don't really understand them, but with somebody guiding you or with your own ability to be open to your own recognitions, you may understand what it means. So he talks about the concise formulation of previously vague feelings. I mean, I do think that that's kind of what happens in dream interpretation. But we're often saddled with feelings that we don't really understand, and we try to put them out of our mind. Like, I don't know what this means. I'm not going to think about this, but maybe it's a clue. The guide says you're erroneously convinced that to understand what occurs in your unconscious means merely finding hitherto unknown elements. You expect completely unknown facts. This is true only in the rarest instances. It's not necessary to go through gyrations and distortions to seek after novelties. Nothing unfeasible is required to discover what needs to be discovered. You do not have to wait for something far away and completely hidden. So he says, there are the half-conscious thoughts, the vague and diffuse attitudes and experiences that are almost second nature and therefore so easily overlooked because they have become part of you. But none of the half-conscious feelings, reactions, and concepts are clearly formulated into concise thoughts. If you watch the half-conscious reactions in the problem areas of your life, you will learn all you need to know about yourself. This is a vital part of learning the language of your unconscious. Then he briefly mentions dream interpretation, but he says he's not going to talk about it in this lecture. And again, on the top of page 6, you weaken it merely by observing it. You weaken the no current merely by observing it.
First step of transformation is observation from Mary Lewis.
When the petrified part of the unconscious is sufficiently badgered, partly from the petrification itself, which you experience as frustration and pain, and partly from your pathwork, the hardness becomes sufficiently fluid to let go of some of its substance. This causes the no current to appear strongly on the surface, less and less disguised, making it more and more difficult to rationalize. This can lead to a turning point, provided the ego, right, Teresa? Does not lapse in its vigilance, allowing the no current to become strong again. Right, Regina?
Yeah.
So I want to read this exercise, which is like a meditational exercise that the guide puts out here, which maybe we could do later. This is sort of wrapping up the lecture. It is essential that you pay more attention to the no current in its exact form. A certain type of meditation can help. Become very quiet and relaxed, and begin by observing your thinking process and even your initial inability to do so. This eventually leads to keeping thoughts out for a short while and making yourself utterly empty. In the emptiness, it is possible for hitherto checked and repressed material to surface. If you express this purpose and desire it strongly enough without shying away from the effort to reach the goal. Though difficult at the beginning, such effort will, after a while, establish a channel to a part of you that you could not previously tap. At first, you see the destructive elements floating up, and then you will be able to tap the constructive elements hidden deeply within. Often, however, this process does not follow the sequence. In other words, it is not that quote unquote good follows after all the quote unquote bad has come out. It fluctuates. This may represent an additional test for you because it may lead you to wishful thinking and an overestimation of yourself. Someone who has experienced some previously unmanifested, creative, constructive soul material may not be further advanced than another who has not yet tapped the divine channel. They just have a different rhythm. So that's a meditative exercise. And then the guy talks about the third eye. The expression the third eye is used to obviously connote spiritual awareness and perception. Through establishing contact with the hidden unconscious and understanding the language of your unconscious obstructions, you develop third perceptive organs and forms of communication in every respect, not only eyes with which to see more clearly, but ears and other senses of perception, as well as a new form of speech. Now, in this paragraph, I think he refers to Eva's training. In a sense, he says, metaphysical practices have succeeded in providing adequate training and disciplines in this respect, but only rarely are they used in the right direction. People are always tempted into the ideal state they have not yet reached, so that newly acquired faculties are put into the service of escaping instead of being used for self-detection and understanding of the meaning of destructive elements. Spiritual bypass, right? I mean, that's one of the ever-present themes of literature, how growing awareness goes to your ego, and you use it for the wrong purposes instead of using it to further expand your spiritual awareness. You don't have humility. You don't follow God's. And this is why I really think it's very interesting to look at how difficult it was, how hard Eva worked to channel manifest the guide. She had to go through all these temptations and opportunities to cop out and not to proceed on this kind of humble questing, this humble search for inspiration, to yield to this greater inspiration, this greater voice. And he says on the next page, basically that the more you're able to bring the unconscious material conscious, the more you perceive other people's consciousness and unconsciousness, the more you understand who you're dealing with, right?
Yeah.
Because, in the last discussion, we talked about the concept that the two higher selves of two people can never be in conflict, But when you are able to know your own shit, you can understand, what another person, when they're being truthful and when they're being untruthful, what they're coming at you with. You could perceive sometimes they're unconscious even when they don't see it. That is certainly true, right? Yeah.
It makes our relation with water be.
With what?
It makes our relation with people, husband, daughter, whatever.
It's very
it is,
right.
It makes it easier because when you start understanding, but you have to put that instead to go, oh, look at what she's telling me, that we are so used to one. Then when you have more understanding, then
Yeah.
your compassion start kicking in.
So, the old thing like, I don't want to deal with,
So because you understand that she's not attacking you or whatever, it's something
Correct,
within her.
correct.
So it becomes very easy.
right, and that also, I think, is
Yeah.
how you don't take it personally, right?
Yeah.
Now,
Rule number
this is
one.
very cool because on 2 pages, page 8, he says, when you learn to do this with calm detachment, that is the process of bringing out the unconscious, making it conscious, you will not only learn to communicate consciously with the constructive part of your unconscious, but you will also consciously communicate with the unconscious of other people. This means a great deal, my friends. You have begun to discover the truth of what I keep on saying, namely, that all human beings constantly affect one another on their unconscious levels. Now, that's what Eva was talking about in her discussion about how, different parts of herself interact with John. The neurotic parts are interacting with his neurotic part, the higher self's reacting with his higher self. The communications you are unaware of determine the relationship. Being in a state of ignorance about this and not being able to grasp what is going on must leave you hanging in the air. You often fail to understand what really happens in relationships. You both fail to understand and to make yourself understood. Therefore, when you learn to consciously perceive the unconscious of others, thus understanding your interactions, you will experience a revolutionary liberation. This indeed is a vital threshold in your development. When this happens, you will see that there is no word to describe this phenomenon. It will be as though a dark curtain fell away from you. Misunderstandings, hurts, fears must cease to exist. You will see that what threatens you in others and makes you tense and defensive can be observed calmly in the same way you have learned to do so with your own self. You will learn to interpret it in others as you have done with yourself. You will learn to interpret what this gesture, this emphasis, this expression, this action, this utterance, that tense muscle mean, unbeknownst to the person. You will hear, see, and perceive what other people really mean, what they want to express in spite of their disguise, what they are governed by behind their conscious attitudes and facades. You will know what their unconscious says, when they behave in such and such a way. When you arrive at this point, you have nothing further to fear. But this is an organic development that cannot happen before you have done it with yourself.
I think,
Yeah.
if I have a difficulty with Tracy, and I say to myself, and I know her history, okay, going back almost 50 years. If I say to myself, oh, I know why she's doing this and why this is bothering me, I have to be very careful. I don't really know. Okay? I have a strong sense of what I think it may be. She may not know herself. What matters is what is my response? Am I empathetic? Am I loving? Am I caring? Am I understanding? So there's a level of behavior beyond knowing. We have to be careful with knowing. The most important thing is compassion.
Yeah.
What do you think, Grace? I put you on the spot. Are you okay? Okay.
Yeah, I'm good. I have a lot of different things that comes to mind. To pick up where Joel left off. Yeah, sometimes when you know something about a person or you know their history, I feel that sometimes that lingers in our subconscious, even though we want to overcome it. And I speak for myself. I tend to hold grudges. It's not been easy for me to forget when someone hurts me, even though I want to be compassionate and forgive. for my own sake. I often feel that even when I have done that, it's still, I'm constantly reminded of what the person did.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a tough thing to really truly overcome. But in my case, even though I'm reminded of it, like this voice in my head telling me what the person did, I I try to separate myself from that thought. Not necessarily giving the person the benefit of the doubt, but it's like giving them a second chance and say, you know what, that was the past. We tend to change. I know I'm changing. So I will not use that as my foundation to forgive or to move forward.
Mm.
But in terms of dreams, ever since I was a young child, my mother would talk about dreams. So yeah, I do have a different kind of approach when it comes to dreams. To me, I have been taught that dreams are there's valuable messages in our dreams. Sort of a second intuition almost. Messages, especially let's say for instance for myself when I'm struggling with a particular situation or thought right before I go to bed, even though I would pray during the day, I tend to be praying at random time, but especially right before I go to sleep, if I were to meditate and then literally speak to my higher self to bring me information that is valuable for me to know, at least for the next step. If it's a big situation, I tend to break it up, and that's why I say for the next step, information for the next step. I notice generally within 2 or 3 days, I have part of it figured out. Even though I don't have the whole picture, but I would still have, to some extent, answers to move forward.
Do you get dreams then when you ask for them?
It doesn't always come when I'm thinking of it. Like when I'm very, whatever is bothering me, if it's very active within me, no. But the moment I release it,
Right,
or
that dream.
yes, yes, and sometimes it comes a little bit late. Well, in my opinion, it comes late, like maybe like a week later after I've made certain decisions. But I think I prefer rather late than never because then I can course correct.
Yeah, so there's inner wisdom you access in dreams, right? I mean, that's the kind of, you give the intuition, you kind of tell it what you want, and then the intuition acts and,
Yeah.
and provides something.
Yeah.
Chad, your thoughts?
My thoughts on dreams or what was
Whatever you like to talk about.
I don't have any immediate thoughts unless there's like a specific question, but I appreciate what Grace said about the dreams. It's funny because somebody asked me today randomly what my thoughts about dreams are. And yeah, I think what you said is very important about asking right before you go to sleep, because I noticed something of like, I think it's like, right before we go to sleep and right in the morning when we're waking up, but we're still kind of asleep. I think that's a powerful time to communicate with the higher self and to facilitate like manifestation and stuff. I don't pretend to fully understand it, but I think there's something, when we are in that kind of state between waking and sleeping, when we are more able to access a lot of this
Yeah, I mean,
information.
you're talking about kind of the activity of impressing. And I think the guy talks about,
What is that?
in other words, you formulate a thought about something.
Yeah.
The thought creates feelings. The thought creates energy. You formulate a thought like it's just what you said, Grace, that you have a problem, you're trying to figure it out. You formulate, you want to understand this, and down the road, a couple of days later, you get some kind of a revelation about it. And I think that this also has to do with the great power that we have to create our own realities by our intention, right? And one intention about bringing these things out from the unconscious, bringing them into the daylight of consciousness, And when you start doing it, then I think that the greater perceptions start to dawn on you. The guy talks about how you more aware and perceptive about other people. You're no longer, it is very similar to an analogy of somebody who's blind. Not your friend who got unblinded, but in other words, if you're blindfolded and you're walking into a room, you're going to hit a lot of things and a lot of people. But symbolically, when you make what's unconscious conscious, you take off the blindfold, you don't hit into objects because you see them. You aren't able to get how the other people are actually behaving. You don't blunder into situations that your unconscious otherwise would allow you to blunder into. All right, more thoughts? Alice?
What is it?
Oh.
Might want to look into the different brain waves, like the gamma, the theta, delta. They go through stages, and the way I see it is, if you were to have it like a skyscraper, and they all access different levels of the building or our subconscious, and each one of it has its own purpose. But I don't want to get
Well,
into
that's interesting. The different levels of sleep, I suppose, and
it's different level of brain waves.
Different kinds of
and it
waves.
allows us, for instance, I think it's the theta that helps us to relax, but it also helps with focus. They also have, so when we are awake and we know how to tap into those frequency, it has its own purpose. Versus when we're about to go to sleep, it happens automatically. And that's how we can, just like I was saying, meditating and then asking, like right before you slip into sleep, while you're still like in both worlds, you're in the border of the physical world and the spiritual world. That is when we get a lot of like reprogramming. We can use that state to overcome fear, and also those debilitating, those no moments, we can, just by putting on headphones and listen to very positive affirmations, it helps to reprogram the mind and get us out of limiting beliefs and yeah, old way of being and thinking.
yeah, that's very interesting.
But I gotta add something.
Of course.
But I don't know if I'm right. But I think that until we don't go, we can do it. Yeah, well, you would. But until we don't go to the specific cause of the underneath, meaning the subconscious, the unconsciousness, very deep, until we don't find the real origin of why that. Because I do the pray and I do the whole 9 yards. But what you said about forgiving somebody that hurt you, that happened to me, and you're still living free in my mind. And then rental free, I call it.
Living rent free in your mind.
Rental free. And you know what? I'm not rich, so I'm about to just, I don't want them anymore. And it's like, oh, I'm praying and I go to church. Oh, that all helped. But it helped to a superficial and deep
Well,
level,
you have to,
but not to the deepest level that these people are not, this thought are not gonna come anymore. And that, I think, you can correct me, Kevin, or whatever, I think that liberation that they talk there is when you go to yourself, to the deep work, going to your unconsciousness and find the root of why. Because it's always the reason that we don't forget. It happened to me and with my family. And that was very, very painful. And until I didn't find that my part, the reason that I couldn't forget and keep coming, rental free, is something to do with myself, with my flaws, with my darkness. Do you get it? That doesn't mean that you're gonna forgive and say, oh, whoever hurt you, oh, it's my fault. No, but it's a 50% of you that you have to work on yourself to find that those people hurt you and you're right, okay? But what is in you that is still living around through here?
Of course.
It makes
Yeah,
sense.
that's what the
I'm saying.
guide, that's really the lecture is all about. You have to look at your unconscious. It's not, and it's what Eva said in her letter as well. Like, he cannot make me feel something. It comes from me. He cannot, he's not responsible for my feelings, right? I am responsible. All right, anyone in cyberspace, or would you say something, Allison, or
I just want to say one thing.
Steve, go ahead.
Something just I think when some well, a couple of things on this note of like forgiving and forgetting. I think when something keeps coming up, like you're still angry at somebody, it's because there's a lesson there that wasn't learned. So it's your subconscious is presenting itself in a form of anger, but it's really telling you what didn't you learn here? You got to look a little bit
It's
deeper.
your image that's still
Yeah.
working, the misconception that still operates.
And because it's when something bad happens, there's often a lesson associated with it that we don't like see initially. But also, yeah, when you hold a grudge and you don't forgive somebody, you're just punishing yourself.
Kind
And
of what?
when you hold a grudge and you
Yeah.
don't forgive, you're only you think you're punishing the other person, but in reality, you're only really punishing yourself. And the only way to truly get past it is to forget about it. Because as long as you remember, you're still gonna hold this grudge. But I think the more important thing is like you try to figure out what's the lesson there that I'm not seeing, because that's I think what the
Well,
important part
that's
is.
right.
Yeah.
That's
What's the image, maybe?
what's the image, or how do things patterns repeat over and over again?
Yeah.
All right, Steve, did you want to say something?
Well,
Please. Frank.
I'm not exactly sure what you mean by the yes or no energy, not being a pathwork expert. But for me, I experience this duality within myself, and it's constant. And for example, even today, I should go out, I should do something. No, I really don't want to. And then there's this duality that keeps going back and forth. And I think a lot of it is because of early trauma, childhood trauma. And very early on, I decided that this no energy, which I think people defining as not very positive, for me was protection, to say no. I don't want to do it. I don't want to be with you. I may not say it so outright, but ultimately it comes to that. And I think that totally informed my life, which allowed me to travel and do very nice things. But I never really made relationships that were very endearing or deep. And then one day you wake up and you find you're not as young or energetic as you used to be. And you find that there's a certain degree of loneliness. And you defined your life by that no, or I'm just, paraphrasing, by that no energy. And I think I have a reoccurring dream that shows that as well. It's being lost in a town and looking for the airport. And it's a fairly constant dream. And walking through the streets of a rather dark, rather gloomy kind of town and feeling lost and knowing I have to get out. And there is a way for me to escape. I just can't find the route. And I think that really symbolizes so much of my life of travel, of looking for something and never really finding it. And not knowing that looking is really within me, within myself. And how do I find that now is somewhat of a quandary.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the airport, because the airport would seem to be possibly higher consciousness. because in the airport you go higher, right?
Right. That's an interesting thought, actually. It's also quick. It takes me out of where I am and to another place. And I always thought traveling was very beneficial because when in the plane, I could leave all my problems and stuff on the runway and say, I'll pick them up when I come back. And of course, unfortunately, the problems are still there when I go back. So I think it's an interesting conversation. And I'm not sure how if I define the no energy, the yes energy, the way we're defining it as a group. But for me, how I deal with it now is I don't go into battle with it. I just sit with it, the no and the energy, the yes energy, and just experience it in my body. And really have a higher feeling, a feeling that it will resolve itself. There is, I think, basic goodness in the universe. And just by allowing myself, and I think you touched on it, Alan, just by being aware of it and touching on that internal strife and just allowing it to be without getting my mind in it, I think it resolves itself because there is a higher power that ultimately comes in and allows me to solve it. So those are some of my thoughts.
Interesting. Like Allison, I was wondering what you thought about this rejecting attitude, saying no, that Stephen's talking about as really relates to the no current and the yes current. They seem slightly different to me.
I really appreciated what you just shared about I'm sitting here sort of feeling everything and hearing what everybody's sharing, and where do I land with this inside of me? And I mean, I feel like I'm in a good place in my life right now, and I feel like no, I'm not really stressing on anything right now, and there is that kind of trust and belief that the next thing that I need to know will be there, that I'll figure it out, that what I need will come to me. So it's a good place for me right now of sort of just, and it was an interesting lecture for me too, but kind of where do I feel that yes and no, and it's just a good place to just be relaxed and wait and just trust, really.
Yeah, we're all observing and growing through observation
Yeah.
and raising our
Yeah.
consciousness. And I guess for myself, I just feel I don't spend enough time asking for help and for guidance. But I think that's true for many people. But yeah, I mean, when you don't distract yourself, there's a lot of benefits that come up.
Yeah.
Right, Regina? I mean, like when you go to church or when you meditate, there's something about you that is in a transformation process. When you uncover the unconscious, when you do this work, just something lightens up and makes things easier.
Yeah, I really appreciate what Stephen was saying about allowing the goodness of what is within your nature and within the nature of others as well, potentially, right, to manifest gracefully, I would add. Well, when I was reading the lecture, I first saw the two levels at work. Like there's this level of behavior that it discusses about where we may say yes or no. We may act sometimes and do something, or we may rest. But then there's the level that the lecture really focuses on to be something more like the spirit or the current behind that choice or that behavior. And so, maybe in that way, a conscious no choice can actually come from a deep yes current. Okay. And if that choice is aligned with like truth and love, or what's genuinely constructive inside the self or within a situation. Likewise, I think an unconscious yes choice could simply sometimes just be permissiveness acting from an unconscious no current within someone as well. So those two areas, the act of what you do or the behavior versus the spirit that informs that behavior, I think was first apparent. But then, more towards Stephen's point, I began to sense that there may even be a third level at work, a more developmental context unfolding through experience within our present lifetimes and perhaps even across, our incarnations. And really, that's where perhaps the soul grows through incarnation and experience itself, especially by wrestling with what we later recognize as no currents. I mean, in the moment, you might not see it. Maybe you just need to give it that time and that grace, like, Stephen was kind of hinting at or bringing to light. It allows then for our present humanity as it is without requiring, the personality to push for immediate harmony, and perhaps sometimes we generally just need that time to wrestle with ours and with others. What is she inadvertent deviations, I think, was what was said in this lecture, within our lifetime here. Alan, it even speaks to the dreams that you were reading that Ava had, and these vague feelings, as the guide calls them as well, right? Perhaps we just need to use that medicine in a sense. So, even then, the graceful unfolding of these moments containing no currents in them can serve something constructive in a wider context. At different stages in our development, I guess I believe that, we're all guaranteed to carry some unconscious no currents around with us, right? But even those become part of the learning that, gradually brings us into greater awareness, and I think even if you remember lecture 63, Alan, man's relationship to God in various stages of development, it really mentions that, imperfection itself becomes the material through which consciousness awakens, So, in a sense, I guess to boil down what my thoughts were at the end of it, I wonder if the immediate goal that the guide was trying to point us to in this lecture wasn't simply to focus on the currents themselves, but to at least, you know, see them, of course, not force them into more awareness of, yes, currents are better or anything like that, but rather to use our spiritual toolboxes, as Miriam would say, with what arises and just honor the life we actually find before and within us,
That's a beautiful
Yeah.
unity of perspective that you bring, Kevin, I must say. Juan, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I think I'll share a little bit. Well, in respect to the dreaming part, I do have some dreams here and there, but to me, I'm not so good at interpreting them as some of you may be. But I do. There are sometimes like really very vivid dreams that I don't know. Personally, I think
You remember one?
and I say to myself, if there is a message from from my higher self, then I should be helped to understand it also, if it's meant for me. You know what I mean? So if I don't understand it, well, maybe, it was not meant for me to understand it. But what I do use, and I think this is what works for me, is that observation of the situations or as I interact with life, every day, my daily interaction with life and others. And just being able to, with practice, I have gained this, being able to catch myself at that moment when there is that discomfort, when there is that friction with, in the relationship or in anything that really throws me off of, my peaceful and calm state of being, then I notice there is a no current right there. And I work with that right then and there immediately. And the way I work with it is through, what the guy says, observation and stillness, I find to be so helpful. meaning, and I think that's why the Bible said, "Be still and know that I am God." Because when you are able to just like not don't react when you sense that discomfort, just sit with it, just observe yourself feeling this. Because to me, the act of observation or awareness, as also the guy calls it, to me, observation is consciousness, really. It's the laser ray of consciousness. So when I focus my attention onto something, whatever it is, I'm laser focusing, my awareness of it, and that brings it to light. And I use that, whenever I find myself in a situation where I am not at peace, where I am not in harmony. So I use that, to really connect with our no current. And as the guy says here, just by the mere act of observing it, by focusing that awareness on it, it starts to dissolve. It's amazing. Even anger, when I not so active now in the world, but I know there were a time, when I was active in the kitchen, working with different culture characters of all kinds. And pressure, incredible pressure that you find in a commercial kitchen. This time when you just blow up, you get angry because there's such a deadline and there's so many pressure from all ends. And so when somebody comes and, with an appropriate statement or anything that cause friction, you react, but just by at that moment catching myself and feeling that feeling and sitting with it and observing myself feeling what I was feeling, anger or whatever it was, sadness or frustration, it just starts to dissolve right then and there. But with that awareness, with that observation and a stillness, not reacting, just observing myself, observing what is going on. You know what I mean? And another aspect that I want to bring that I mentioned quickly, that also impacted me from the lecture is that the fact that where the guy says, and this is important because I hear people sometimes saying that, oh, that was my intuition. Oh, that came from inside. I got this knowing from within. But we tend to forget that within is not only the positive, the intuition, the higher self, but it's also the lower self there. There is a negative current, but it's also this enormous, limitless creativity in there, which is the higher self, right? But it's the lower self also there that sometimes we get is, we think this comes from the intuition, but not necessarily. I mean, if it doesn't, the way I can kind of detect if it's either one or the other is if it's from the higher self, I will feel peace, I'll feel calmness, I'll feel harmony. If it's from the lower self, I will feel anxiety, I will feel uncertainty, stress, and ambivalence, right? So, but it's also, I think for me, it is very important to know that inside is not only all these negative currents and negativity and images and wrong conclusions and so on, but it's also this enormous, limitless potential in creativity that is there. That as we keep working, removing and dissolving these no currents, this beauty, creativity, and aliveness just come to the surface by itself. Yeah.
I think so. It's like the metaphor of the stream that's clogged up with branches and rocks, that as you are able to move away and clear out the stream, the water flows faster and faster, right? The current goes faster. That's I guess the intuition of the higher self, or our ability, the energy. We have more energy because it's flowing faster. We can accomplish more. We have more creativity, we're connected with the higher self. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Beverly, are you around? Would you like to say something?
I'm here. I'm just listening. I guess I'm just thinking how the role of judgment, because it's really hard to not criticize oneself as one's looking at what's happening in your mind. And the whole idea of the no current is very useful. I think you can kind of feel it in your body, the resistance, the tension whenever you have that stuckness. When you're aware of the sensations in your body, I was just thinking, I can feel the tension whenever I'm finding myself stuck. So that's all I was thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah,
actually said
thank
that
you.
another word for no current is resistance, he says in the lecture. Yeah.
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 Me as a kid, and I find a lot
Yeah.
of stuff, so.
Yes.
Like, we have a lot of wonderful observations
then
and
why you
insights
this?
from
why
this
you-
lecture.
Is Sid still there?
We certainly do.
Sid's there.
Sid, what are your thoughts? Pathwork helper, Sid
Ready,
Portsmouth.
ready. It's coming from me there.
Oh, it's on mute, I think,
Uh,
yeah.
I think it's
Sid, I
me.
can't hear you.
I'm sorry, I keep getting muted for some reason. Um, I saw there was something in the lecture that gave me the hope that you could transcend the duality, that the yes current was underneath the no current and strong enough to once you've integrated the no current to no longer need the duality. There was a thought that I saw, and then you could create from a harmonious, beautiful place. Then there was another interpretation that if you have the 50-50, that you're going to have a yes current and a no current in everything that you do, regardless. And then I think it's the issue is just which one you choose to identify with. So if you integrate, do your best to integrate the no current, let out the yes current, but the two currents will probably always be there, but will not have as much effect, and you shouldn't have any self-judgment about them. And then the last thing was, I was looking at Val Malonis had a little quote somewhere. Val, she's Pat Rodegast's daughter,
Oh, yeah.
and she said something about, it gave me the impression that we're all beings of love, and we all come from a place of love, and we come into here where there's duality. There's good, there's bad, there's yes and no, but we came here as beings of love to just transform it, to bring that energy and bring that in that transformation in ourselves and in the planet. And it just gave me the way she said it was so sweet. It gave me a feeling like, oh, so we like signed up. Like the ship is leaving. Anybody want to go and see and have some fun and see what we can do on Earth? Yeah, let's go. And that felt like a very loving, joyful exploration.
That's why it's important to know the bigger picture, right, Sid? It is
Yeah. I mean, the bigger picture helps.
bigger picture. Yeah.
Could I
Not
just,
to get lost in the minutia.
Yeah,
were you,
Go ahead,
were you
Joel.
done, Sid?
What?
Were you done?
Yeah. Thank you, Joe.
So just to segue, Sid, so that state where the yes and the no are not predominant. So let's say you have a coin, right? So the coin has two sides. And so one side is the yes and one side is the no, but then there's still the coin itself, right?
Yeah.
And so we are the coin, and we can experience non-tension between the yes and the no. That's why we meditate, right? That's why we experience joy, however we find joy. Barbara creates, right? And I imagine when she's creating something and really having fun, and maybe she's her 7-year-old self, the yes and the no current is probably in the background, right? So like going back to what Stephen's saying, so I think, Stephen, the answer is whatever it is that attracted you to travel, whatever it was about the positive feelings that you had about getting away, right, is to find that right here and right now. And it, Marion talks about the toolbox. So it could be as simple as having an ice cream cone, right? To get in touch with whatever it is that brings us joy and helps us to get out of our mind and, what the monkey, as Tracy says, the monkey brain. Riding bike, whatever it is, that's, that feeling when you were 12 years old and you're riding down the street and you have confidence and you just put your arms up, right? And you know you're gonna be okay, because you know how to ride the bike. And so bringing a little bit of that into our daily life.
Yeah.
Can I?
Yeah, Barbara.
I'm not really sure what, the thing is that the title of this lecture was The Language of the Unconscious. And I found it like a very positive, powerful lecture for myself. And I keep looking for my language of unconsciousness or unconscious, and I'm not sure what it is, I was, I have been working a lot in my studio lately, and I'm working on projects that I'm not even sure why I'm doing it. And I feel like there's something in that that's probably part of my language of unconscious. And I guess I'm very curious about other people's like language of unconsciousness. I don't think because it said in the lecture, we're not, it's not going to go into dreams. But I'm thinking like sometimes it's like you're walking down the street and all of a sudden you decide like, oh, I remembered to get milk. And like, so you feel happy that like, oh, you do remembered, that somehow you remember that. Or you remembered like, oh, I'm walking down the street and it reminds you of, the house somebody else lived in, and that reminds you of this and that, and you call them. So I'm wondering how that relates, or if people relate to it in that way. Sort of like this language of unconscious, and how the symbols of things that you either notice or, I'm not talking about the reflective times when you have your daily review and you're thinking about all the things. I'm just talking about the current of your life, the things that pop up that might be valuable to look at during your daily review.
So
Yeah,
I can
Teresa.
sort of say something about that, because I was thinking the same thing, like, if we want to make the unconscious conscious, and it's trying to speak to us through this language that's not always explicit, right? How are we reading into that? And I was thinking like when Alan was talking about you sabotage something. Because you think something, you think you want something to happen. And I remember this as a young person. This was something that actually brought me to Pathwork, because I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was like, why does that keep happening? Like I noticed like over and over again, I would try to do something or get somewhere or have some goal. And at the end, it wouldn't happen, I would like sabotage it in some way. And that I was thinking is the language of the lower self, the unconscious no current, which is, I don't really want it. I must not really want it. Or why would I sabotage it, even if it's an it was like I was doing it without consciousness. So, and then like even now, like I have a lot of balls in the air between my family and all this stuff. So I'm going back and forth through the city, and sometimes I'll like forget something upstate, and I'll be like, maybe I didn't really want to do that. Like maybe that's my unconscious saying, trying to tell me that I didn't want to do that, or don't, there's something in me that didn't want to do whatever it was that I forgot to do. So that's how I think of my language. I always think of it in a negative term, like, oh, I'm not getting, because I think I always, the lecture even says the unconscious is the unconscious lower self has a lot of power, right?
Yeah.
Over how you drive your life, how you steer your life and what you're doing. So I'm always trying to uncover the lower self. And I feel like the higher self stuff just comes and you're in the flow, like Alan was saying, you're in the flow. So that to me, I'm not seeking for the unconscious higher self, because I think it just presents itself when you remove all the blocks, which are the lower self. So if I'm not manifesting what I think I want, then to me that's the language.
Sure, no doubt.
Yeah.
I think the more you strengthen the higher self, yes, the easier it is to see the no.
That's correct.
Yes.
As I'm getting older, I've moved a lot of blocks already. The whole process is a lot faster.
Yeah. Yeah, Grace, you were gonna say something?
Yes, I want to say something a little bit about what Barbara was mentioning. A lot of the thoughts that we're thinking, a lot of it's not ours. As we're going through our day, and especially when we are on the go, and our vibration is lower, we are absorbing a lot of energies from our environment. And a lot of time we think these are our thoughts, but they're not. And this is why it's super important to always get back to a place of balance and pulling back our energy in. So when we come back to our balance and we can raise our vibration, that is when we clear the clutter and have authority over our own thinking. And the more we can have that authority over our own thinking, the more, what's the word? The less distorted our perception of our own reality is. And I think it's like a mirror for our dreams. When we are the same thing, if we are at peace with ourselves, or we are in balance, or our vibration is high, those messages that we get in our dreams are more beneficial to help us with anything that we're dealing with to move forward. So yeah, like sometimes you have thoughts and you're wondering where's that coming from. It's not always our thought. So and then I'll tie it in with what Juan was saying. When a thought comes to us, figure out how is this, how does it make me feel in my body? Yeah, does it make me feel at peace? Then go with it. If it makes me feel anxious or you're still in doubt, give it some time, sleep on it again, is what I would say. And one last thing, I want to mention something Regina mentioned about getting to the root of things. My question is, can we really, really get to the root of anything? Yes, I think we can try, but do we really get to the core of anything? Because I feel that life is a never-ending evolution. So when we're trying to wanting to get to the core of something, I think sometimes that's where we get resisted by wanting something too much. I don't know, that's what came to mind.
And you verify that if you want to get rid of these people that live run free in your mind, you have to, and I'm saying it sounds like it's easy for me. No, it's not easy. You know, I'm working daily on this because I've been through what you went, and it was very tough. And I thought that I got it, and I went to the roots, and I said, "Oh, I got it." I felt liberated, and I felt, oh, like kind of. It's not arrogance, but kind of it says it there. You feel like, wow, I got it now. Finito. I'm done. No,
Not so fast, right?
they kept coming and
I switch it to a better thought. Even if it's just like,
no, it's
you know,
switching to a better. I'm sorry, switching to a better thought is temporary fixing. It's not the.
but if you got momentum going.
Yeah, but it comes back. Yeah, you switch it out. That is easy. You switch it.
Well, I think you're supposed to find these images and then you keep on meeting them over and over again until the guide also calls this the purification process. Yeah, so I mean, I think that, in the process I think you can get to the root of things. And I think you could argue that some of the purposes that we're incarnated is to get to the root of a particular thing in a particular life. And if you've done that, you've fulfilled your task.
Yeah.
You've gotten to this, maybe purified this one aspect.
And one
Petrified piece. And what you're saying, Grace, is that Yeah, the guy talks about that in a lecture, that there's lots of things coming in from the outside that we're kind of like receivers, like radio receivers, and we receive stuff. And it may not be our stuff, but we think it is sometimes. And I have to think about social media, right? It kind of outpictures that whole process where all this stuff is coming at you all the time. And it's even funny because now there's a lot of bots, that 30% of the traffic, like on X, is not even human beings. So like what exactly is going on with and where does that come from? So these are very interesting subjects.
So we could just let the robots talk to each other. We don't have to go.
That's what we have to do.
Yeah.
Or as my mother used to say, when she learned about internet stuff, like in the 80s, she said, if only the worms would eat the spam. I thought that was kind of cute. Oh yeah, Grace.
So you, it just dawned on me that maybe not everything all at once, but maybe in some aspect, if we get to the root of something, the one way to know if we have gotten to the root of one particular aspect is forgive me, what Chad was saying is that until something has not been resolved, it's gonna keep coming until it is no longer an issue or a hindrance to us. So yeah, it came to me after I asked the question, but
Yeah, it's another word, but also it's very liberating. Yeah. Doesn't mean that you get it all and you are vibrating with God. No, this still is gonna come another situation that you're gonna feel that unease, and you gotta go and say, "Oh, I thought that I got it, but it's still this conflict there, and it never ends."
No.
And so you gotta go again and again, because it's our abyss, the lack of humility that we have because of our ego, our health ego, that makes us think that we get something. Oh, I got it, so I don't have to worry anymore. So you go into another hurt, one other uneasy how do you say, anxiety or whatever is going on, that you know that two currents are going like this, and you go, oh, but I got it. So what is this? And I try to avoid it because I already got it. So I don't have to work on it because it's hard. Nobody wants to. So it's what he said is because it's coming back, is because you still have to work.
yeah,
more.
sometimes it takes years apart. You think you have resolved something and then years later.
Lifetimes are probably the phrase authentic thoughts. And I was just wondering, I was a little unclear if could you explain more about what you meant by that?
So yeah, I use my own word, so a lot of things come to me in sensate, like a feeling. So I tend
okay,
to
so
use my own words to translate my feelings to express what it is that I'm trying to share. But I use the word authentic, meaning it is not outside influence. So for example, you walk, like you mentioned, you're walking down the street, you have a thought, right? And then you're wondering whether that thought is yours or not. But now, let's say for instance, you're not sure, and then later on you go home, you meditate, and when you're calm and you have hold back your energy from the go, because when we're going, we're more in our masculine energy, we're diverting our energy. When we are in our feminine energy, we tend to pull our energy in. That's how that's how our energy body works. So now when we are clear of the external, okay, so let me back up a little bit. So when we are calm, centered, and our energy is clear of distortion, yeah, we're calm, we're meditative. Right thereafter, if you start to have a thought, it's more likely your thoughts and not thoughts that are influenced by the collective. So that's what I meant by authentic thought. It's your personal thoughts rather than energies that you've been under influence from the outside. Whether it's even in your home. For example, in our home, it's nice to have like a smoke burn sage or something like this. It helps to clear the energy. So yeah, I hope that makes
I think,
sense.
yes, but also how you started saying that the thought, when you express yourself, the thought is just also in your body. In other words, the connection you had,
Say that one more time.
the thought is, it's in your body, it's a feeling within your body.
Feeling it.
Oh, for me,
For,
well,
yeah,
everyone.
and so
Oh, I
I
see.
think that, for me, that the idea of connecting authentic thought with also sort of like an inner thought, or, you know, like within, like a full bodied thought.
Mm. Mm, yeah.
That's a different thing. I mean,
Maybe
that
it's a
has to
different
do with how you process your own thoughts as an individual, as a whether you think the thought fully, whether you thoroughly and feel the thought and embody the thought and crystallize the thought, right?
Mhm.
Rather than kind of a flitting thought that just kind of comes in, goes out. Yeah.
Can I just make, I know we
Sure.
have to do the meditation.
Yeah, we do.
I had two quick comments and then one question. I'm gonna skip the question because in line with the meditation, don't want to take up too much time here. Anyway, I don't know if Steven's still there, but what he said, something came to mind with me that I wanted to share with him. Hopefully he gets this. But he talked about, traveling in the external world looking for an answer, and then his dream, like he's lost in the town. Something came to mind of like, you can't really find answers in the external world most of the time. They can only be found in the internal world. So I think it's important for all of us. I mean, exploring, I think, helps you to connect to the internal world. Traveling in the external world helps you to connect to the internal world, but the answers can only be found in the internal world. And then back with Barbara and what you were saying about the language of the unconscious. Something came to mind, which is that the language of the unconscious is feelings, not words. More like feelings and images, not words. And then we translate it into words in our mind. So we get like a feeling or an image, and then we translate it into words in our mind. But the way that the unconscious like initially gives us messages, it's not through words most of the time. Anyhow, I'm curious
Okay.
about the yes and no current because I don't fully understand it, but maybe.
Well, I think you should simply reread the lecture and, maybe outline certain paragraphs. And it's also true that, if you want to understand, you can ask for your own guidance and you can say, what is the meaning of the yes current for me in my life? Or what is it? How do I see? Does the no current manifest? And then if you kind of just let yourself write, you go to guidance. It's so important to get that.
That's good.
All right, my friends. So, Eva used to always be very punctual. It was like a big deal. Like everything would start on time, end on time. That was it. So we don't really have time for meditation unless you guys want to. Or I could just simply read this exercise, this meditative exercise.
I've been waiting all night.
You want to hear it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mentioned it right at the beginning.
Well, actually, I did read the exercise, but there's another exercise that the guy talks about, which I can read. Let me read that.
Certain thoughts and.
Did you read the first exercise?
I did. I read
Yeah.
where he basically
They relax.
has to get in a meditative state and let things kind of come up to your consciousness.
Even the resistance.
We know that.
Not do it.
There's another like 5 points.
Yeah.
5 point. Yeah, here it goes. He says,
Questions. So.
well, I'll read this. Let's close our eyes and think about this. Language of the unconscious. Ask yourself, what goal do I want now? Where am I dissatisfied? What would I want to be different? Second question, how much do I want it? Third question, to what extent is there something in me that does not want it or fears it, or for one reason or another says no to it? Fourth question, if the no current exists regarding the very thing I wish, it must also exist in my pathwork itself. How does it manifest there? Last question. How can I detect the various forms and manifestations of the no current in my daily life? If you clearly formulate these 5 questions and begin truthfully to answer them, your work on the path will be most dynamic and your progress will astound and delight you.
Amen to that.
Amen. All right. All right, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen.
Next month,
Yeah, but it's 3 weeks from now.
3 weeks from now,
This is because we pushed this.
right,
one back.
Teresa's gonna present.
And I'm gonna send out an email because I want to do, it relates actually to this lecture and the class two we did on 59-160. I'm bringing the unconscious conscious. And so I'll do some teaching in the beginning, and then Deborah, my classmate who lives near me, is gonna come down and we're gonna do a what we call an ER process, which is emotional reaction. And we're gonna work through the emotion, the feeling, and then some questions and how to explicitly and intentionally process, do the actual work of transforming and bringing the unconscious conscious. It's kind of like a demo.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Teresa. We're looking forward to it. I'll see you guys in 3 weeks, okay?